He had always been careful, trained to read situations with precision, yet nothing in his career had prepared him for the audacity of what happened that sunny afternoon. The day began like any other. The quiet hum of suburban life wrapped around. The streets like a familiar blanket, neighbors tending to lawns, his children riding bikes, and the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting through the warm air. He stood in front of his home, a modest yet well-maintained house, sipping coffee, allowing himself a rare moment of peace. To any casual observer, he was just another resident, blending seamlessly into the neighborhood. But that calm was about to be shattered in the most surreal and unsettling way. The first sign of trouble was the sudden screech of tires and the authoritative knock on his front door. He opened it to see two men dressed in what appeared to be police attire. Their badges gleamed, their uniforms immaculate, and their presence carried the unmistakable weight of authority. "Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest," one said, his voice firm, almost rehearsed. The words barely registered at first. He raised an eyebrow, a polite but measured gesture, waiting for clarification. "Excuse me," he began. "Can you explain what this is about?" The men exchanged glances, a flicker of uncertainty crossing their faces, but they pressed forward. "Step outside." Now, that moment, the training, the years of experience. The countless hours in the field, all of it, surged through him like an electric current. He knew something was off. The demeanor. The details, they didn't align with any legitimate procedure he had ever encountered in his long career with the FBI, and then it hit him. These were not law enforcement officers. They were imposters, emboldened by ignorance, arrogance, perhaps an underlying prejudice that whispered they could intimidate him simply because of the color of his skin. His heart rate didn't spike. There was no panic. Instead, there was a calm, focused awareness, a readiness to act, to protect, to assert the dignity that had been challenged. He stepped back, his eyes never leaving theirs, measuring, assessing. "I need you to show me your credentials," he said, his voice calm but commanding. One of them fumbled with what looked like a laminated badge, the edges peeling slightly, the print cheap and suspicious. His mind raced, analyzing every detail, the font, the hologram, the way the badge was clipped to a belt not designed for real law enforcement equipment. It was amateurish, almost laughable, yet the danger was very real. These men were here, in his space, attempting to coerce him into submission. Relying on the assumed power of uniform and authority, he could hear it then, the whispers of the neighborhood, subtle but present, the unspoken judgments and assumptions that had lingered beneath the surface. How quickly some had been ready to believe these strangers over him. A black man standing on his own property, asserting his rights. The situation was a stark reminder of the systemic obstacles, the deep-seated fears, and the biases that still permeated society. But he would not be diminished, would not allow fear to dictate the narrative. His training had taught him patience, precision, and the undeniable truth that control over oneself often determined control over the situation. "What is the basis of this arrest?" he asked again, each word deliberate, measured. "You can't just claim authority. You need proper documentation, a warrant signed by a judge." His voice carried a weight that even they could not ignore. They hesitated, a crack appearing in their facade, and then came the inevitable escalation born of frustration. They attempted to push past him, to assert control physically, believing that intimidation could replace legality. But he was ready. Every instinct, every muscle, every ounce of his discipline coiled like a spring. In an instant, he had assessed their strength, their balance, their vulnerabilities. The confrontation, though brief, was intense. The men quickly realized they had underestimated him, that the veneer of authority they wore could not withstand the reality of experience, training, and unwavering self-possession. He disarmed the situation with precision, making it clear that any attempt to proceed would be met with consequences they could not comprehend. And then, with calm authority, he placed a call not to them, not to the local precinct, but to the FBI command center he had once served so diligently, reporting an attempted impersonation and potential threat. The irony was not lost on him. The very career that had trained him to enforce justice now lent its protective shield to his own home. His own dignity, as the impostors fled, stumbling in panic. The neighborhood watched in a mixture of awe, confusion, and silent shame. What had been a potential disaster had transformed into a revelation, a powerful, undeniable statement about the intersection of race, authority, and perception. He stood there, composed, every bit the embodiment of calm power, his presence, demanding respect not through intimidation, but through unwavering dignity and competence. And in that moment, he knew that the story would travel far beyond the streets of his neighborhood. It would become a testament to resilience, to the truth that courage and preparation could neutralize fear. Even when that fear was cloaked in authority, the lesson was unmistakable. In a world quick to judge, quick to assume, and quick to wield power without understanding, the most potent defense remained knowledge, discipline, and self-respect. He had faced the illusion of authority and emerged unshaken, not through aggression, but through mastery of self and circumstance. The impulse had left, but the echoes of the encounter lingered, a reminder that identity, training, and dignity could never be taken lightly. For him, it was more than an incident. It was a statement of truth. The world might see him as just another man on a quiet street, but beneath the surface was a life forged in service. It's a sacrifice and an unyielding commitment to justice. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, he had already begun the process of reflection. This was not just a story about a thwarted threat. It was a story about the intersection of race and perception, about the subtle, insidious ways prejudice could manifest, even in the most unexpected forms. And yet, it was also a story about triumph, or about standing firm in one's truth, about letting the actions, not the assumptions, define reality. For him, it was another day, another challenge met with grace and precision. But for the neighborhood, and for those who would hear the story, it was a powerful reminder. Never underestimate the strength, dignity of a man who has walked through the fire of life's hardest trials. The aftermath of that surreal encounter rippled through the neighborhood, in ways both subtle and undeniable. He returned inside, closing the door with a calm that belied the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Each movement, deliberate and measured, reflected a man who had faced danger countless times, but now faced a different kind of threat. Born not of criminals or terrorists, but of ignorance, entitlement, the deep-seated prejudices that often lingered just beneath the surface of everyday life. He sat at his kitchen table, the warm glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the countertop, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. To process, it was a moment of reflection, not fear. For decades, he had walked paths fraught with danger, uncertainty, and moral complexity, all in service of justice. As one of the FBI's most respected agents, he had infiltrated organizations, dismantled criminal networks, and navigated the murky waters of national security. Yet nothing had prepared him for the audacity of suburban intimidation disguised as law enforcement, a scenario that many would have met with panic, but he met with the poise of experience. The clarity of mind honed through years of disciplined training. This incident, as unsettling as it was, became a mirror reflecting society's failures, its assumptions, and its deeply ingrained biases. News of the event traveled quickly, though not through traditional channels. It was whispered from neighbor to neighbor, shared in hushed tones that betrayed both disbelief and admiration. There were those who questioned the legitimacy of what they had seen, unable to reconcile the idea that a black man, standing resolutely in his own home, could command such authority without raising a hand in anger. And yet, that was precisely what had happened. His strength was not in aggression, but in presence and unwavering embodiment of dignity, intelligence, and controlled power. The impostors had underestimated him, assuming that race could be leveraged as a tool of intimidation, only to discover that experience and self-possession were far stronger weapons. He reflected on the irony, the bitter sweetness of it all. In a society that so often questioned black men's authority, that assumed guilt before innocence, that wielded suspicion as a tool of control, here was a man whose life had been dedicated to protecting others from real threats, yet was confronted by a fabricated one. It was a microcosm of a larger reality, one where courage and competence were sometimes invisible to those unwilling or unable to see beyond their own assumptions. But he did not dwell in bitterness. Instead, he chose clarity, choosing to let the incident reinforce a truth he had long understood. Dignity, courage, and integrity were the most formidable defenses one could possess. In the following days, he ensured the impostors were apprehended. The fake officers were unmasked, their attempts at intimidation laid bare for all to see. Legal consequences followed swiftly, but what remained most significant was not the punishment. They received it was the message sent to the community. To the world, the illusion of power could not overcome truth, preparation, or the strength that comes from living honorably. Those who had once whispered judgments now looked upon him with respect, even awe. His life, once invisible to casual observation, now shown as a testament to the extraordinary resilience that often resides in ordinary places, yet beyond public recognition. The encounter left a deeper imprint, a reaffirmation of purpose. Every day, he walked through spaces where perception could betray, where assumptions could constrict, and where courage was demanded not just in action, but in simply existing authentically. He understood that his story was not unique, though. The circumstances were exceptional. It was emblematic of countless black lives navigating a world quick to judge, slow to listen, and all too willing to doubt. And within that reflection lay both responsibility and pride. He would not allow ignorance to dictate his narrative. He would continue to live with the honor, discipline, resolve that had defined his career. As the neighborhood slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, he embraced the serenity with gratitude. The encounter had tested him in ways both tangible and symbolic. Yet he had emerged stronger, more certain, and profoundly aware of the balance between vigilance and peace. The impostor's departure did not erase the echoes of their intrusion, but it did affirm a truth he carried in every fiber of his being. Fear cannot overpower knowledge. Prejudice cannot diminish competence, and intimidation cannot overcome dignity. These were not abstract ideals, they were lived reality, forged in experience and tempered by years of unwavering commitment to justice. In the weeks that followed, he continued his life with quiet determination. He returned to his work, his community, and his family, carrying with him not only the lessons of the encounter, but also the knowledge that his existence, his presence, and his achievements were a form of quiet revolution. He was a man who had faced threats both real and imagined, who had navigated systems of power designed to marginalize, and who had emerged not only unscathed, but empowered. And while the impostor's attempt to intimidate him had failed spectacularly, the greater triumph was the affirmation of identity, of truth, and of unshakable dignity in the face of adversity. He often reflected on that day, understanding its layers and implications. It was not merely a personal victory, but a profound statement on the intersection of race, perception, and authority. He knew the story would resonate far beyond his street, becoming a beacon for those who needed to see courage lived authentically, power exercised responsibly, and dignity maintained under scrutiny. And in every retelling, every reflection, every quiet moment of contemplation, he recognized the deeper truth. The most formidable strength is not in the uniform one wears, the badge one carries, or the assumptions of others. It is in the mastery of self, the unwavering commitment to justice, and the courage to stand resolutely in one's truth. By the time night fell, painting the sky in deep indigos and purples, he stood once again at his doorway, gazing at the street that had witnessed both audacity and humility. He understood more clearly than ever the power of presence, the necessity of resilience, and the enduring impact of living a life anchored in integrity. The neighborhood had seen a confrontation, but he had lived a revelation. And in that revelation was the quiet, unwavering knowledge that no impostor, no prejudice, and no assumption could ever define him. He was not just a man who had survived an attempt at intimidation. He was a symbol of courage, a testament to disciplined power, and an enduring reminder that dignity, when wielded with wisdom, was invincible. And as the stars emerged one by One in the night sky, he allowed himself a subtle smile. The world might still judge hastily, still underestimate the strength of those it had long marginalized, but he knew the truth. He was a man who had navigated the shadows and emerged into the light not as a victim of circumstance, but as a master of his destiny. The imposter's story had ended, but his story continued, a powerful, unyielding testament to pride, courage, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. In the quiet, he felt an almost sacred sense of victory, not in the confrontation itself, but in the affirmation that no act of ignorance, no show of false authority, and no prejudice could ever eclipse the resilience of a man standing in the truth of who he truly was.